Next is we need to assemble some parts. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this LED light. This is a very bright LED. Here's what information on the back of the package. And it has a very wide viewing angle, 140 degrees. And you can also see that it's pretty intense light here. Draws a lot of current. And out of the package, here's what we've got. And it has 4 pins. Don't let that scare you. 2 of the pins are negative, 2 of the pins are positive. And you can see here, one corner of it is slanted, and this tells you this is the negative side of the LED, and the other side is the positive. Next, you want to measure some wire, and this is very critical. You want to use wire that is solid core. Do not use stranded core. You want to use solid core for 2 reasons. One is it retains its shape when you bend the wire, which is very critical. Also, it will act as a pin that we will use to stick inside the Molex connector, and this is what helps make this mod a lot easier. Okay? Unfortunately, with this mod, you will need to do some soldering. But before we do that, we cut our wire here at 7 inches. And I highly recommend, if you're going to do a lot of these mods, to get a tool like this. This is a wire stripper, and it's very cool. It makes stripping wires a lot easier. And basically, you insert the wire in at the top here, and when you squeeze the handle, instantly, like this, like magic, the end is stripped. And this does really nicely for solid core. Stripping wires using this tool is a lot easier. So I highly recommend getting one of these tools if you can. And here we have our 2 wires, and what we're going to do now is we're going to take our needle nose pliers and we're going to loop one end together. And once we have both ends looped, this is kind of how it looks. So one end on both leads is negative, the other is positive, and this is how we're going to wire it up, and we're going to put some solder in here to firm up our connection. This is our soldering iron. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it does the trick. And I have to say, if some of you are kind of nervous about soldering or have not done any soldering before, I highly recommend you just go on the Google website and just do a search for soldering tutorials. It's not that hard. It's pretty easy. Basically, you heat the iron up, melt the solder into the place where you want the solder to be, and you're done. Just make sure, of course, you don't touch the iron, duh, and don't breathe in any of the vapors that may come up from your soldering work. And here's one end done, and these are small parts, and so I kind of propped up the wire a little bit with a nearby screw, kind of helped out a little bit. So there's one end, and next I had to get some needle nose pliers to kind of hold everything in place. Do what you need to do to hold everything in place. So we got both of our wires soldered to the unit, and before we do anything else, we want to just test it, test the current just real quickly, the negative to the negative terminal of their battery compartment, the positive to the positive. Just make sure the light comes on, and here we do have a light that comes on. Very good. And also it'd be good to take a Sharpie and just mark which end is negative, because it'll be a bear once we get this in and you forget which is negative. You got to trace that back. Well, this will take care of that. So just mark one in black for negative. Next, you set that aside, and we move on to our next assembly project, and that's going to use one of these pref boards. And this measures 2 inches by 2 inches. This is too big, and what you'll need to do is kind of cut this down, and you can easily cut this down with some wire nippers. Just be very careful. This stuff can be kind of brittle, and you want to use some eye protection when you do this. Hopefully when you're done with this, you'll have a small corner like this to work with. Okay? And this is the brains of the outfit. This is a transistor. Here's a close-up view of the transistor, and we're using the one that Party Tagger recommended, the transistor 3904. And this is a schematic of what we're going to build. And don't let this scare you if you never worked with schematics before. I never have either, and I just took some time to try to figure out and understand what's happening here. And basically, this transistor part is this circle with the B, C, and E on it. This is acting as a switch. When current is connected to B, the switch is on and it lights up our lights up here. When there's no current to B, the switch is off, and there is no current and the lights will be off. So at the top part we have 9 volts going through our light and draining and going to the output of our ground, or 0 volts. Okay, so here is the transistor. The question is, okay, which pin does what? Well, obviously the middle pin is the trigger pin, but which other pins is the negative and which is the positive? Well, if you have the flat side facing you to the right, the top pin is your positive, or where you receive the input voltage, and the bottom pin is where you connect the ground wire, or the negative, and that's where all the current drains into. Next, you just put the transistor in 3 spaces onto your pref board, and I like to just bend the wires just so it stays nice and locked in there. And next we'll need to pick a resistor. This resistor is 10K. Brown, black, orange is 10K, so this is 10,000 ohms. And next we're also got another resistor here. This is for the hit light, and this is a very low ohm resistor. Here I believe this is like an 83 ohm. Okay, so you take your first resistor, this is the 10,000 ohm resistor, and you just bend the wires like this and put it in place so it's close to the trigger pin, which is the middle pin. Just take one end and just bend it over so it touches the trigger pin of the transistor. And yes, you're going to need to solder again. And what you do is you just solder these 2 connections together. And since it's in the pref board, it makes it a lot easier to hold and to keep in place. And after it's soldered, you got something like this. Next, you just trim off the excess wire, because there's no need to have excess wire here. And so that's done. Now what you're going to do is I'm going to take some solid core wire. This is some separate wire that I cut. I didn't show the step of cutting this, but basically just get some wire and trim the end, stick it to the hole that's closest to the ground part of the transistor, and get it close to where you want it to solder the ends together. And once you have it soldered, the next step here, I don't have a picture of me soldering it. I forgot to take a picture of that, but trust me, it's soldered. And now we're going to put the other resistor in. This is for the lowering the voltage through the LEDs. We're going to put this on the board, and this is going to go to the input of the transistor. So we got one end close to the input of the transistor and the other end sticking out like this. You can see here I kind of looped it around real close to this end, and what we're going to do is solder it together, and this is what it has when you have it all done. Okay, just to recap, this wire here is where we're going to attach our lights to. The voltage from the Molex connector is going to go to the input of our light, and the output, or the negative end of our light, is going to go to this wire. The hit connector from the Molex is going to go to here, this trigger part, and in this part, this cable here is going to be wired to our ground. Okay, really simple, really easy. Okay, we set that aside. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put the light in, and I found the best place to do this is right at the top.
Does Windjammer know what he's doing? Will this mod work? Will he short out some wires and cause a fire, destroying his house? And what about Naomi? Tune in next time for the exciting continuation of Love of Laser Tag.